asks for a small, divergent group of people to leave other loves behind.
In 2022, I uploaded a video about infamous cult leader Gwen Shamblin and titled it "The Millionaire Preacher with a Weight Loss Cult." At the time of this recording, it's my most viewed video, and it's understandable why. The story has so many twists and turns, it's hard to believe. In 2024, Michael Shamblin, who now goes by the name Michael Black, sat down with News Channel 5 Nashville, and he had a lot to say, including that his stepfather Tarzan had threatened him with a sniper's bullet, and yet, like within all cults, he was still expected to show up with a smile on his face. He even said that after the plane crash that killed his mother, he never once shed a tear, saying, quote, "By that point, I had spent so many years getting abuse from some of these people that I never shed one tear, not one, and to this day, I have never cried about them," end quote. When asked if he didn't even cry for his mother, he replied, "The people dying, nope, never cried for them." This is an update on the Gwen Shamblin saga, Michael's tell-all, and the leaked recording from Remnant Fellowship's new leader, Elizabeth. Before we begin, a quick word from the sponsor of this video, Parade. Parade has saved my underwear drawer by changing the game with high-quality, comfortable, sustainable, and inclusive fabrics. I personally fell in love with their Replay line. It's the perfect fabric for all-day, everyday wear. It doesn't ride up and appears seamless and smooth under my clothes. It comes in hundreds of colors with sizing from extra small to 5X, and all Parade products are made from rescued materials usually wasted in the production process. For Parade's Black Friday Cyber Monday sale, all my subscribers will receive 50% off site-wide with no minimum purchase just by clicking the link below in the description box and using my code GoodGirl-BF. I love how cute and buttery soft these feel against my skin. Whether you are making a list and checking it twice, or shopping for something special just for you, Parade's biggest sale of the year is here. I already have my cart ready to roll for my next order with Parade's Luxe Dreams pajama set and the Luxe Tie Blutter crop. Things will go fast during Parade's Black Friday Cyber Monday sale, so click the link in the description box below and use my code GoodGirl-BF for 50% off the entire site with no minimum purchase. Now, back to the video. To quickly recap, as a registered dietitian, Gwen started a popular diet method called the Way Down, which consisted of a lot of prayer and fasting, mixed with some intuitive eating methods. Gwen was everywhere in the 90s and early 2000s, from the Tyra Banks show to mainstream media and even Larry King. Long story short, she got too big for her britches and soon decided she was a prophet. She moved into a mansion, which was a former plantation, and started a church called Remnant Fellowship in Brentwood, Tennessee. She called it the One True Church. Well, at the hands of Gwen and her henchmen, that church morphed into a Christian cult mixed with weight loss, as her congregants were instructed to buy her weight loss program, her books, audios, merch, subscribe to the app, and more. But this wasn't just church with ladies who wanted to watch their figure. She even had an online store for kids who she called Zion Youth. Speaking of kids, Gwen's cult became so dangerous that an 8-year-old boy named Joseph Smith died at the hands of his parents, who were following Gwen's disciplinary teachings. Each parent was sentenced to life plus 30 years. Gwen paid all their legal fees, but in her eyes, they were just a casualty in a spiritual war, and she had to fulfill her prophecy. After hiding her husband because he didn't fit the body type she was trying to sell, Gwen's 2 children, Michael and Elizabeth, became her main companions, never leaving her side and always on stage, smiling and applauding their mother dearest at every turn. Then, Tarzan entered the picture. Also known as former actor turned handyman, Joe Lara began going to Remnant Fellowship in an effort to network, and pretty soon he swept Gwen off her feet. In return, she sugared that baby hard. The two even began their own online show called Life with Gwen and Joe, which they tried to pitch to Hollywood in hopes of getting a reality show, but that failed. No matter, Gwen didn't really need it. She had the money of her devoted followers. Until she and Joe and a few others from the church died in a plane crash on their way to a Trump rally in May of 2021. The church was in chaos. What would they do now that their prophet and diet guru was dead? They didn't have to wonder long, because Gwen's daughter had been groomed for the role, and she was named head of Remnant Fellowship. But Elizabeth, who lost her husband in that plane crash along with her mother, never showed up to church. Instead, she phoned in sermons or had them pre-recorded. This left outsiders wondering, will the cult that Gwen built survive? Well, when something bad happens to a cult or its leader, whether it's a death or if the group receives any criticism, they usually double down, and that's exactly what happened. Elizabeth declared that God would smite HBO Max for making a documentary on them, and that all of Remnant Fellowship would be rewarded as the one true church. But throughout all the drama, somebody was noticeably missing: Gwen's firstborn, Michael. After his mother's death, he completely stopped showing up to church and was nowhere to be found. That is, until now.
Have any of the members of Remnant Fellowship been asked to leave Remnant Fellowship because they're overweight after being there for a long period of time?
No.
Certainly people have been asked to sit out and leave because of overweight. They're asked to webcast, to not come into the sanctuary.
Michael and Elizabeth were raised in their mother's web of power, deceit, and praise. Nobody loved the spotlight more than Gwen Shamblin. Michael was the musical one. He led the praise and worship team while Elizabeth was the public speaker. Michael said, quote, "Me and my sister were used, and Gwen would tell us this stuff. She used us to pull people into the remnant because she would use us as examples. Look how loyal and good my kids are." End quote. Michael stopped calling her mom years before her death. In fact, he told News Channel 5's Phil Williams that Gwen hadn't felt like a mother to him in a very long time, recalling that the last time he genuinely told his mother he loved her was during his college years. Michael said that the last time he remembered his mother being normal and humble was before they moved to Brentwood when they lived in Memphis. But once her Way Down workshops started to take off, Gwen changed. As he put it, quote, "She started getting the praise from people. She started getting lifted up. Just like so commonly happens, the ground started falling lower beneath her high heels. All of a sudden, it became the claps and the praise. I think people can get addicted to that." End quote. Once Remnant Fellowship was formed, he said that Gwen, although she would deny it publicly, absolutely saw herself as a prophet and believed she had the answer to all of life's problems. She even told her children that they had special religious significance. To outsiders of the family unit, it looked as if Gwen was praising her children, but she was really using it as spiritual manipulation. Michael went off to college and loved it, but Michael going to college didn't serve Gwen in any way, so she made him quit part of the way through to come back to the church and be the praise and worship leader. But after years of this, Michael was growing weary and wanted to return to school and finish his degree. In fact, he tried, but Gwen sent another remnant leader to deliver the news to Michael. He told Michael, quote, "I've been told by Gwen to sit you down and say you cannot leave. You're anointed." End quote. Michael went on to say, quote, "I'm going to say this, and the people of Remnant are not going to like this. If the Remnant members sitting in that building realized how much information that these people have on them, there would be no one left in those seats." End quote. Apparently, Gwen and her henchmen were keeping what they called a guidance system used to track the remnant congregation. Church members would have their activities tracked. From the time a person joined Gwen's church, they would immediately get a file started on them. In said file would be video footage of each member. At her church, Gwen loved having people get on stage to share their weight loss success or a remnant fellowship testimony, and each sermon was filmed and also live streamed. Michael said this was specifically done not to give members of the congregation an opportunity or to show that the organization was credible, but to add the video evidence to each person's file in case they turned on the church and wanted to leave, or if they became critical of anything having to do with Gwen or the church, and even if they got litigious. The church would then use those videos against members as ammunition. With evidence provided by Michael, News Channel 5 shared examples of other things Remnant tracked. Some of the examples were a guidance stats sheet that tracked the marital situations of certain members, how they were doing on their weight, and personal issues with which they were dealing with, including lust. Instructions that certain members needed to have their weight reported once a month and entered into the guidance system. Dates and times that members signed on to Remnant webcast, In one case, noting that a member usually has it going in the other room type of thing and not necessarily listening. A text noting that a member would need leadership permission to have a Facebook account, while another suggested the need to check a woman's Instagram. Gwen Shamblin notifying her team that a female had been monitored by fellow members, and Gwen was saying yes to her request to return to church. Documentation that a remnant wife was not completely under the authority and questions her husband, that she had confessed to being anti-authority and always having a better idea. A note that another remnant wife had been counseled to stop controlling and driving her husband insane, that she needed to just put the jeans on that he wants her to wear. The woman was told that her husband was starting to look at other women, and that's because she's making that happen. When Michael was asked if he had ever seen that information used against remnant members, he replied, absolutely.
A lot of times you'll have people that are maybe even upset when they leave out of here.
Which made me think of my 2004 interview with Gwen Shamblin and another church leader. I had asked them about a former remnant couple who claimed the church had pressured the wife to give up the mental health medications that had been prescribed for her by doctors.
So if you read her testimony, she went back on her drugs. So it wasn't from the lack of drugs that sent her back into a psychiatric hospital.
We have all the information in the world on this person. As soon as they turn, we're going to eat them alive in court because we have all this video footage showing how much their life was changed by Gwen and helped by Gwen.
And while that's bad enough, it wouldn't compare to Michael being threatened with a sniper's bullet by his stepfather. Before her death, Gwen and her henchmen had known for a few years that Michael was pulling away. He was trying to have as little to do with Remnant Fellowship, which did not make his mother happy. When Joe Lara started coming to church, Gwen honed right in on him, and they began having an affair almost out in the open. Gwen and Joe would travel with each other, and Joe would be sat next to Gwen at church events and leadership parties. As he got closer to Gwen, Joe became aware of who was on her good side and who was not, specifically Michael. As Michael put it, quote, "He didn't like me because I was the one guy who was not going to kiss up to him," end quote. Michael wasn't happy that Gwen last-minute changed her church doctrine to allow divorce after being married to his father for nearly 40 years. Not only that, but Michael's father shared with him that during their divorce proceedings, he discovered a secret bank account that Gwen created, which she used to lavish Joe with gifts while still married to Michael's father. Because Michael was drifting away, Gwen and Joe expressed they were worried that he would become a defector and tell their secrets. In their eyes, he was practically an enemy, so one day when Michael was over at their mansion, Joe suggested he and Michael go out back where he liked to practice shooting. Once there, Joe Lara held up a sniper's bullet in Michael's face and said, quote, "This is what we're going to take you out with from 1,200 yards, end quote. And while Joe never got the chance, Michael suspects his mother never got the fairy tale ending she was hoping for.
And from the day she divorced David Shamblin until the day of her death, they never had 1 month of peace. Her and Joe. Every month was custody fights with his ex, Natasha, or there was constant issues, constant trouble.
Michael also said that Joe was not a good influence on Gwen. She started experimenting with marijuana and some hard drugs. Gwen was also constantly drunk. Meanwhile, her congregation was supposed to be the picture of purity. Michael stated the church members didn't know how Gwen lived her life behind closed doors, other than what they saw on her YouTube channel and in a church service. With Gwen, as with most cult leaders, it was do as I say, not as I do.
Still, Michael Shamblin says there's a part of him that almost felt sorry for Joe.
I could tell he didn't want to be there. That's why he was flying so much. It's an escape.
And Laura would be at the controls when their plane crashed into Nashville's Percy Priest Lake.
I think deep down, once he got into that position, I think he wanted out.
He wanted a divorce.
He wanted out of that because he had no clue how controlling and what kind of life that was going to be with Gwen.
Immediately after his mother's death, Michael left Remnant Fellowship. He and his wife also separated. It had been rumored years before that Michael wanted to divorce his wife, but Gwen wouldn't allow it. As soon as Gwen died, Michael was able to finally start living his life on his terms. He said he fell into a major depression as he was always told Remnant had the answer, but Remnant felt suffocating. He said about the ordeal, quote, "I wish I could go back and see my earlier self and go, there are people being hurt here. You're not 100% innocent and perfect going along with this. We thought we were heading up, but it was a decline." End quote. At 43 years old, he said he regrets everything. His sister, however, regrets nothing. As she said in a leaked audio, Elizabeth Hannah will carry on leading her mother's church as she wants to become famous in heaven.
I want to make a difference. I want to make history. I want to start a movement around the globe. My mother started it, and I want to not only keep it going, but to expand it around the globe in such an exponential level that anyone who sees it can pick it up and get it. I want my name to be written in heaven, and I want to be friends with the greats, and I want them to know that every day I woke up, that I was not here for myself. I was here to make the movement happen. You'll be lifted up if you follow this example, if you follow my mother and follow me as I follow her. And I'm going to write this book about my mother, and the world will one day see that she's a misunderstood woman. Her philosophies on child raising were awesome, incredible. She couldn't hurt a fly. Don't you want to join me? I'm a lot of fun, by the way. Don't just believe what you hear. You need to come party with me. Guess what? Every time they're rude and they lie about me, then more people in heaven hear about it, and I get a better standing again in heaven. So they're cracking me up. The more false things they write about me and my mother, the higher up I'm going to go. You'll see that Gwen and I were just two little loving blondes who were born in the South at the wrong time. I mean, nobody wants a Southern woman to be a preacher.
The only person who knows what went on behind closed doors with Elizabeth Shamblin, now Elizabeth Hannah, is her brother Michael. In his interview with News Channel 5, he refused to speak critically about his sister and said he has an immense amount of sympathy for her. Elizabeth not only lost her mother in the plane crash, but also her husband. Michael said he doesn't know if she will be viewed as a prophet in the way his mother was, but Elizabeth will be viewed as being anointed by their God to lead the church. However, she hasn't stepped foot in the church she now leads since the plane crash in 2021. Speaking of the plane crash, I wanted to update something that was wrong in my first video. At the time, the news was reporting that the plane Joe Lara was flying that day crashed because it was overweight. But more than 2 years after my video was uploaded, the National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the plane crashed due to pilot error. They believed Joe Lara was struggling with spatial disorientation, and that when he thought he was accelerating the airplane up, he was really accelerating into a continuous descent. The NTSB report also noted that Joe likely did not effectively use his instrumentation during takeoff and climb. When Gwen Shamblin first laid eyes on Tarzan sitting in her church pew, only to then cheat on her husband and even change her doctrine so she could be with him, she could have never imagined he would lead her straight to her death only 3 years later.
Call it a church in my mind. It is a church, but it's a cult. She would have said, this is a group of people who are looking for the lead of God. What it actually was, it's a group of people looking for the lead of Gwen. You have how many hundreds of people have I talked to, how many situations of husbands, their wife gets to go visit this church for a weekend. It's just an innocent little sweet lady talking, and it's reading the Bible, and then there's a dance part. And then a year later, the husband is fighting for his life, fighting for his children in custody, and with everything, his last penny to try to get his family back that's been ripped away. When somebody like leaves Remnant, I experienced the same thing. I went from having hundreds of texts a day to 0.
After the initial shock, he says it's been the best part of his life.
And I've had the realest conversations with people since I left the church, the cult. It's like, and I don't know how to describe it, it's like I woke up from a 20-year dream. There was a haze the whole time.
As for those still in Remnant,
they have said this recently in Remnant, because somebody reported to me, if you leave the Remnant, you have left God. I think that's unfair. And what I would say to that is, God was around before Remnant, and he will be around after Remnant. He was around before Gwen Shamblin, and he will be around after Gwen Shamblin.
This has been the update to the Millionaire Preacher with a Weight Loss Cult.